Do not be intimidated by the length of this gargantuan video. You don't have to watch it entirely to get the information you're looking for. That's why you have timestamps and chapters, so you can jump to any subject that interests you without any hassle. With that out of the way, allow me to introduce myself in case you're not yet one of my wonderful subscribers. I am Halcyon, and on this channel guess it's just Halcyon now. Anyway, on this channel I usually make guides for games that I enjoy playing, such as X4, Deliverance, or Bannerlord, to name but a few. Right now I'm focused on Cyberpunk 2077, and today's guide is pretty much a huge shopping list for all the cybernetic augmentations in the game, with a few comments and opinions thrown in. What I did basically is I traveled to every single Ripperdoc in Night City, took a look at their wares and catalogued every piece of chrome available for purchase, and then I compared different tiers to help you figure out what's the right choice for you. Specialization or min-maxing, whichever you choose, this guide has you covered. Right now the game is pretty damn easy even on the highest difficulty setting, and you don't really need all this info. But I was personally frustrated by having to travel to all the Ripperdocs until I found the right implant, so I'm hoping my shopping list will prevent you from experiencing the same frustrations as I have. To help you better navigate this guide, let's have a few words about its structure. The first subject we'll discuss today are Ripperdocs, who they are, where they are, and what they each specialize in. After that, I'll highlight unique cybernetics that are stocked by a single Ripperdoc or two at most. Those are pretty easy to miss if you're not paying attention. Subject number 3 is choosing the right operating system to complement your playstyle. I ran some important comparisons between these to help you determine which is the right one for you. Afterwards, we'll take a closer look at some crucial cybernetics to figure out which tier suits your needs the most. Once that's done, I'll display a huge list with all the other augmentations, as I'll briefly share my thoughts about each of them. Finally, we'll wrap things up by discussing Cyberware Mods, as well as where to find them. You ready? You look ready. Half mechanic, half field medic, the Ripperdoc is an essential part of every cyberpunk's entourage. Licensed medical care is usually reserved for those on a corporate leash, and even if that wasn't the case, official doctors would lose their right to practice if they agreed to install military-grade cyberware on anyone other than corporate agents or government officials. As such, street mercenaries like yourself must go to makeshift clinics tucked away in shady back alleys and pay the black market price for these prized augmentations. But to these rippers, you're not even worth a second glance if you ain't got the street cred, so you might want to complete a few jobs before setting an appointment. It is important to note that while arm and leg cyberware have a fixed street cred requirement across all clinics, depending on their rarity of course, that does not apply to other cybernetics. In order to unlock a Ripperdoc's premium stock, you will have to reach a certain street cred level that is different across all clinics. So far, I've only been able to find a total of 14 Ripperdoc clinics throughout Night City, but I've heard rumors of black clinics hidden from the public eye, so it's entirely possible I missed a few of those. If I did, that's not something to focus on, so let's talk about the clinics I did find. Now, every Ripperdoc seems to have his or her own specialty and stock a lot of cybernetics in their particular categories, but nobody has everything you're looking for, so you will eventually have to visit all of the Ripperdocs to complete your technological evolution. Let's start with the most important Ripper, Victor Vector. He's pretty easy to find, seeing how your friend Jackie already introduced you to him, but in case you need a reminder, you'll find him near Bradbury and Boran in Little China. His specialty is ophthalmology. He's the only one selling the Mark III Kiroshi ocular implant, as well as a host of eye modifications such as the legendary Trajectory Analysis, which boosts the headshot damage you deal by a whopping 50%. There is, however, a little catch. Before Vic allows you to take a look at his inventory, you'll have to pay him a debt of 21,000 eddies. Other than the arm and leg upgrades, all his stock can be purchased without any street cred requirements, as far as I know. If you go a little to the north, you'll enter Kabuki Market, which hosts not one, but two Ripperdocs. First, there's Dr. Chrome, whose specialty is the integumentary system, and not far from there you'll find Charles Buck, who's kind of an amateur but may sell you some good entry-level augmentations for the circulatory system. If you play your cards right, you can get Buck to shave off a few bucks of his prices. A bit further to the northwest, near Pershing Street, you will find the clinic of Cassius Ryder, the oldest Ripper in NC. He's also the wisest, seeing how his specialty is frontal cortex augmentation. From my observations, you need 14 street cred to access the premium stock of these last 3 Rippers. All of these specialists are located in the Watson district, which is locked down until you have your first date with Silverhand, so they're your only options for cybernetic augmentation during Act 1. Actually, there's a 5th Ripperdoc which is hidden at first, so you will have to travel towards the eastern end of Watson, near this junk shop, and once you get close enough, his clinic becomes available. It's called Instant Implants, and this Ripper mostly sells entry-level skeleton upgrades, which might be useful to a mercenary just starting his career. After the lockdown on Watson is lifted, you're free to explore Night City at your leisure, so I've used that freedom to visit the other Ripperdoc clinics to see what they have on offer. Let's keep going east to the district of Westbrook, home to 3 such medical practitioners. First, there's a lady simply named Ripperdoc, and because she shares that name with several others, we'll call her the Japantown Doctor, since she operates in the Japantown neighborhood. It seems her specialty is the frontal cortex, although she sells a few implants for the nervous system as well. Not far from her you can find the clinic of Finn Gerstadt, or as he prefers to be called, Fingers MD. He may look a little creepy, but he's got some preem chrome for sale, and he's the only one in town with a proper selection of immune system enhancements, among a few other peculiar things. You will eventually butt heads with this guy throughout the main story, so make sure you've purchased all of his good stuff while his services are still available. From my observations, 27 street cred is all you need to unlock his unique stock. And in the rich neighborhood of Charter Hill, near a bunch of luxury apartments, you will find the clinic of Nina Kravis, who reminds me of my dentist and specializes in the skeletal system. Make sure your street cred is above level 29 before paying her a visit. Moving on to the next district, Santo Domingo is split in 2 big neighborhoods with a Ripperdoc each. In Arroyo, you can find a clinic that has a huge selection of implants for the nervous system, once you've reached 43 street cred, and Rancho Coronado is home to Octavio's clinic, whose main specialty is abject poverty. But in terms of cybernetics, he has a few good implants for the circulatory system. As for street cred requirements, by the time I visited Octavio, my 30 street cred was enough to unlock all of his stock. Since we're at the eastern edge of Night City, why don't we go for a little drive into the steppe where we'll meet the Nomad Ripper, who just like Octavio, also specializes in open heart surgeries, but whose premium services are reserved for those with a street cred above 43. Now that this is done, let's head over into the worst district, Pacifica. The doctor here works for the Voodoo Boys, so it's no wonder most of his inventory consists of cyberdecks and frontal cortex implants suited for netrunners, which can be purchased as soon as you've reached 37 street cred. Once you've had your fill of rundown buildings and the sound of French, it's time for some Latino vibes. In the district of Haywood, and more specifically in the Wellsprings neighborhood, you will find one of the finest Ripperdocs in this city. Since he refuses to disclose his real name, we'll call him the Wellsprings Doc, and his main specialty is the circulatory system, but he'll only sell his top shelf equipment once you have 49 street cred. And finally, in the downtown hood of city center, there's another nameless doc who is pretty much the best in town. And the most expensive. He does not appear to have a main specialty, but if I were to venture a guess, he also focuses on the circulatory system, although he offers a varied selection of high-grade cybernetics for all of your systems, but as you can expect, you'll need 50 street cred to unlock his entire stock. And that would be the complete overview of all the Ripperdoc clinics in town. Now that we know what to expect from these Ripperdocs and we have their precise locations, let's move on to the subject of unique cyberware. The most peculiar cybernetic augmentation is the Second Heart, available only at the Wellsprings Ripper. This upgrade is rather costly, and it only becomes available to you very late in the game. It also requires 16 body to install, but with this bad boy implanted in your chest, you've essentially become a shadow who dies twice, just like Sekiro. This doctor also sells the Bionic Joints Skeletal upgrade, which slightly lowers the recoil of your ranged weapons, has no requirements, and costs only 6,000 eddies. In Westbrook, Doc Fingers sells 4 pieces of unique cyberware. First, there's the legendary Pain Editor, which lowers all incoming damage by 10%, but is only usable by really cool people who have invested 16 points into that attribute. Secondly, if you have 10 points in body, you can install a Detoxifier, which makes you immune to poison. Third, there's the epic variant of the Fortified Ankle, which does not allow you to jump as high as the other leg upgrades. But if you find yourself regularly kissing the pavement, you might find the Hover Thrusters a worthy investment, if you can afford the $75,000 cost. And like a true furry foot fetishist, Doc Fingers also sells the Lynx Paws, which allow you to run without making a sound, although they are ridiculously expensive. 85k and they don't even have a double jump.
Tisk, tisk, tisk.
You may also find the Lynx Paws in the inventory of instant implants, in case you're trying to turn yourself into a cat girl while you're still locked down in Watson. The next piece of chrome is crucial for reflex builds. The maneuvering system, which is only found at the Arroyo Ripper, and upon installation it allows you to dodge in midair. When paired with a Kerenzikov implant, the maneuvering system enables some pretty awesome trick shots. And it's also dirt cheap, costing only 3000 eddies, but it does require you to invest 14 points into your reflex attribute. Last and the least useful cybernetic is the Self-Ice Cortex implant, which removes any hostile quick hacks that have been uploaded to your systems, with a 45-second cooldown. It's rather cheap, but it does require 10 intellect to equip, and quite frankly, if you're running an intellect build, you're better off using more offensive cyberware. This one's kind of a waste of space if you ask me. As you can probably expect, you can find this one in the inventory of Cassius and the Pacifica Ripperdoc. Before we move on to the next chapter, I also want to have a word about other important cybernetics, such as the one for your arms or hands. As you've probably noticed throughout your travels, every single Ripperdoc may replace your arms with either Mantis Blades, Gorilla Arms, or the other 2 upgrades. But unless you're on a budget, you're gonna want the legendary versions, which cost 100,000 eddies, require a street cred of 45, and can only be found in the inventories of the Downtown and Wellsprings Ripperdocs. I think you can also find them for free, but so far I've only managed to track down 2 of them. The legendary Mantis Blades may be found in the loot chest of this Valentino Assault in Progress, not far from the Wellsprings Ripper, and the legendary monowire is found right here in this pharmacy in East Watson. If the pharmacy is not on your map, that's because at first it's occupied by a bunch of animals which must be exterminated during a gig called Shark in the Water. As for hand enhancements, you get the basic versions from the first quests in the game and you could upgrade them into the epic variant, but that's a waste of eddies. You're better off jumping directly to the legendary variants instead. So, the legendary Smart Link allows you to use smart weapons to deadly effect and can be found in Victor's inventory, and if you plan on getting the other one, you still need to visit Victor and purchase the Epic Kiroshi Eyes and the Trajectory Generator mod. This mod will help you preview the ricochet direction of your power weapons, provided of course you've installed the legendary ballistic coprocessor from Instant Implants. Both legendary hand upgrades cost 21,000, but you can only equip one, so you're gonna have to make a choice. I personally prefer the Smart Link, as the ricochet tends to be rather unreliable. And that would be it for unique implants. Let's move on to what is, in my opinion, the most important choice in regards to your cyberware. The operating system. Why is it so important, I hear you ask? Well, Chum, the OS determines your entire playstyle, and in my opinion it's the central component of all of your builds. You want to be the fastest hand in the West? Sandevistan Reflex Booster. Want to turn into a terrifying beast? Berserk Combat Amplifier. And if role-playing Hackerman is more your style, that's what the cyberdeck is for. However, there's so many variations with so many different effects and requirements that they absolutely had to be compared. But in the interest of saving time, I'll only give you the top 5 variants for each of these operating systems, and I'll even throw in my comments to help you pick the one that fits you best. Once that's done, I'll give you the full list of OS cyberware, so that you may feel free to reach the same conclusions I have. Let's start with the Sandevistan Reflex Booster. As the name implies, you need to develop your reflexes to use this OS. But if you like moving quickly while everything else around you slows to a crawl, you're gonna love it. There is, however, one thing that you need to be aware of when it comes to this OS, and for this, I'll need to give you a proper example. The description of this uncommon sandevistan says that it slows time by 75%, while the legendary variant slows it by 10%. Something's wrong, I can feel it. You see, something is wrong. The item description, because the best sandevistan does not slow time by 10%. It slows time to 10%, meaning when you activate it, you move 10 times faster than everything else around you. Now that this is out of the way, let's move on to the top 5. The most powerful reflex booster is the Militech Falcon, sold by the Wellsprings Ripperdocs for 44,000 eddies. What makes it the most powerful? Well, let me give you its specs. In terms of slow, it's the worst out of all the legendaries, but it compensates by having the longest duration, a 15% damage increase, plus 20% crit chance, and plus 35% critical damage bonus. By the time this sandevistan wears off, you'll have killed at least 10 enemies. However, its perfection is offset by the large cooldown and the fact that you need to maximize your reflexes, which is not ideal for min-maxing. The second best sandevistan is the Chianti Mark V Warp Dancer, which is found at the Downtown Ripper and it costs as much as the Falcon. I consider this one to be the second best because of its powerful time dilation. While active, you move 10 times faster than normal, but because you're so fast, everything around you will appear to move in slow motion. The reason it's not the strongest reflex booster is its low duration of only 8 seconds. However, you can do a lot of damage in those 8 seconds, especially given the fact that your crit damage is boosted by 50%, in addition to the 15% damage bonus that is offered by all sandevistans in this tier. It also has a reasonable cooldown of 30 seconds, which is nice, and to top it off, it does not require you to max out your reflexes. 18 points are enough for this bad boy. Third on the list is the Dynalar Sandevistan Mark IV, sold by Vic for 35,000. It slows time to 25% for 16 seconds, it has a decent cooldown of 30 seconds, and it reasonably increases damage and crit chance. It's the most balanced of the bunch, and it only requires you to invest 15 points into reflex, which is perfect for min-maxing. Closely tied to number 3, the Chianti Mark IV, sold by Duck Fingers, is the most spammable sandevistan in the game, with a cooldown of only 15 seconds. The slow is about as powerful as the Dynalar version, but lasts for a shorter amount of time, and it also doesn't offer anything else besides the 15% damage increase that all the reflex boosters in this tier offer, which is why it ranks lower. If you're addicted to slow-mo, this one is the best, but it isn't as reliable as the Dynalar. Its reflex requirement is the same though, so this is also great for min-maxing if you're into that sort of thing. And at number 5, the best bang for your buck is sold by the Ripper in Pacifica, the Dynalar Sandevistan Mark II. What makes this one so great, you may wonder? Well, let's see. It offers the same slow strength as the legendaries before it, while being 2 tiers lower. It lasts for 12 seconds, just like the Chianti Mark IV. It has a reasonable cooldown of 30 seconds, and the cherry on top is a plus 10% damage bonus, which is almost on par with the legendaries. All this comes with a price tag of only 15,000 eddies, and it requires no more than 9 points of reflex, making it the best sandevistan for a low-level mercenary, or one that chose to focus on other stats. The only downside to this one is a single upgrade port, whereas the legendaries have 3 mod slots. As promised, here's the entire list of sandevistan reflex boosters, and before we move on to the Berserk software, allow me to give an honorable mention to the Dynalar Mark I, sold by Cassius. This is the best reflex booster available in Watson in case you want to be quick on your feet before the lockdown is lifted. As you've seen, each of those has its own strengths and weaknesses, and it's up to you to determine which is the best one. Now let's go Berserk. There's not much to say about this OS. Most versions offer pretty much the same bonuses with minor variations which makes them better suited for different tasks. Basically, all Berserk mods last for a short amount of time, and in that time your melee damage, armor and resistances are slightly increased, while the recoil of your guns is decreased. You'll also recover a bit of health for every enemy you kill while Berserk is active, but that's negligible. Last but not least, it allows you to execute a superhero landing, which I'm not gonna explain, you can see what it does for yourself. Right then, here's my top 5 Berserk combat amplifiers. The undisputed champion in this category is the Militech Mark V, sold by Nina Kravis for €44,000. When activated, it lasts for 10 seconds, boosts melee damage, armor, resistances, and weapon handling by 15%, and the reason it's number 1 is the 40% max health and max stamina bonus it offers. If you fill its mod slots with 3 beast modes, you'll be the scariest melee combatant on the field. The only downside is the massive 1-minute cooldown, which can be lowered with the right cyberware. It also requires you to invest 18 points into body, but for melee fighting, there's no better option. Number 2 was a tough call, but ultimately, the Zetatech Mark V from Dr. Chrome claims this place. It lasts for 10 seconds and it only boosts your stats by 20%, but if you have good mods for it, this one is the most reliable, thanks to its 30-second cooldown and most of all, its availability. This is the only legendary berserk you can obtain in Watson, and if you play your cards right, the only one you'll need for the remainder of the game. Biggest downside? Its price and the 18 body requirement. The Biodyne Mark IV would have taken second place if the other one wasn't available so early in the game. This one lasts for only 5 seconds, but during those 5 seconds your melee damage and weapon handling are improved by 25%, and you also gain a 20% ranged damage bonus which can further be enhanced by mods. This one is perfect for a soldier type of character, or even stealth archers who love seeing big damage numbers. Its only weakness is that compared to the other combat amplifiers, this one doesn't make you very tanky. Its 16 body requirement also makes it perfect for min-maxing if you want to play a tanky super soldier with a second heart. At number 4 we have the Zetatech Mark IV, sold by the Arroyo Ripperdocs for 35,000 dinars. It only lasts for 5 seconds, during which your stats are boosted by a mere 10%, which isn't much, but as I've already implied, Berserk is most useful when you install some proper mods, and with a cooldown of only 10 seconds, you'll be able to spam this one to your heart's content. And it only requires 16 body, so you don't need to go all in if you want your build to be more flexible. 5th place is taken by the Moretech Mark III, sold by the Downtown Ripper for only 25,000. Performance to cost ratio is the best, as it comes with a 10-second duration, a plus 20% health bonus, a 15% armor increase, and a slight improvement for melee damage and weapon recoil, all on a 30-second cooldown. Since it's not a legendary piece of chrome, it only has 2 mod slots, but it may be good enough if you can only spare 12 points into your body attribute. And just like last time, here's all the Berserk implants if you want to take a look at them, with an honorable mention. The Biodyne Mark II, which is sold by the Downtown Ripper and offers a 25% melee damage boost, a 10% ranged damage bonus, but because it's a lower tier item, it only has 1 mod slot. Still, I consider it to be a good entry-level combat amp if you want to test the waters. Cherry on top is the 15-second cooldown, which makes it quite reliable. Now let us talk about cyberdecks. Unlike the reflex boosters or combat amplifiers, cyberdecks don't have any requirement, which is strange. I think this is a bug because I feel that high-grade cyberdecks should require the player to invest points into intelligence. But as things stand, anybody, no matter how unintelligent, is free to install the best cyberdeck on the market and become a decent hacker overnight. Anyway, since everybody can use any cyberdeck they want and are limited only by the amount of money they're willing to spend, I did not bother to catalog anything below the rare quality because as far as I'm concerned, those are all slightly different pieces of garbage that aren't even worth a second thought, let alone the effort it takes to write down their stats. Even wasting my breath talking about them is more than they deserve, so without further ado, here's my top 5 cyberdecks. If you're fully spec'd into intelligence and you've crafted legendary quick hacks, there's no better cyberdeck than the Tetratronic Rippler Mark IV, sold by Nina Kravis for the price of 44,000 eddies. There's a lot of features to talk about, so instead of reading each of them out loud like a fucking drone, I'll instead give you an overview of what this beauty can do. Basically, with low cooldowns, optimized RAM usage, rapid upload speed, and its unique ability to make ultimate quick hacks spread around like the gift that keeps on giving, you can make a whole scene look like a hedge fund office in a matter of seconds without ever having to set foot inside. This is by far the most specialized cyberdeck in the game, because while it's the best one for dedicated netrunners, it's absolute garbage for rookies looking to play around with a bit of hacking. The best part about it is being able to unlock it at 29 street cred, which can be achieved in just a few hours of bounty hunting. If you're not a dedicated netrunner and you suddenly developed an interest in hacking, the best deck for you is the Netwatch NetDriver Mark V, sold by the Wellsprings Ripper for 44,000 eddies. There's only one problem with this one. By the time you've unlocked it, you will have cleared at least half the map because this baby only becomes available at 49 street cred. Still, if you want a solid cyberdeck that works with any quick hacks, not just legendaries, this is the best on the market. Huge RAM size, maximum buffer, great RAM recovery, massive quick hack spread distance, bonus damage, and the ability to upload a quick hack to 3 enemies instead of just 1 make it a solid contender for the first place. But ultimately, this one falls short due to its massive street cred requirement. Third place is claimed by the Stevenson Tech Mark IV, sold by the Ripper in Pacifica for the reasonable price of 35k. What makes this one so great is the RAM capacity and buffer size, as well as the reduced cooldowns and improved duration of combat hacks. Ultimately, the 4th and 5th place are great contenders for this spot as well, due to their different specifications, but this one works great for a vigilante who wants a great deal of crowd control against his enemies, and a maximum buffer size for more money. Another tough choice due to all the different specializations, I ultimately had to give the 4th place to the Fuyutsuki Tinkerer, which is sold by the Pacifica Ripper. This one is better in combat than the one on 3rd place, and it works exceptionally well with the Contagion quick hack, but the reduced buffer size make it slightly less desirable to me. If that's not a deal breaker for you, it could easily snatch 3rd place. Finally, at number 5, I honestly can't make a choice. If I have to choose one specifically, it's the Arasaka Mark IV, sold by the Downtown Ripper. It's decent in combat, but it's even better for stealth operations. If you're a sneaky breaky hacker, this is the best choice, but otherwise, it's inferior to everything above it. Anyway, it's difficult to rate cyberdecks given how different their specializations are. So the best thing you can do is inspecting their attributes and picking the one for the job you need. If you just want to make money, pick the one with a maximum buffer size. If you want intense net running, take one with RAM restoration, and if you just want to cause absolute mayhem, 1st and 2nd place have you covered. As always, I need to give an honorable mention to the Biotech Sigma Mark II, sold by Dr. Chrome. It's probably the best entry-level deck on the market. Before we conclude this subject and move on to the next chapter, however, I need to issue one huge buyer beware. A few of these decks are complete rip-offs which should be avoided at all cost. Take the Raven Microcyber Mark III for example, which becomes available at 49 street cred. The Mark IV offers twice the bonuses for only 10,000 more eddies, while becoming available way earlier in the game and can be purchased before the lockdown on Watson is even lifted. Another piece of shit cyberdeck that must be avoided is the Tetratronic Mark II, sold by Dr. Victor. This one is optimized for legendary quick hacks, and let's just say that by the time your hacking skills develop to that degree, you'll want to buy a better deck. You're better off keeping your money. So far I think I'm the only one on the net doing all these comparisons, but there's no reason for me to compare every single tier of every single cybernetic implant, so I will instead take a look at the most important augmentations to help you figure out which one to incorporate into your build. By the way, in order to make it easier for me to categorize these implants, I've designated them as Mark I for common, Mark II for uncommon, up to Mark V for legendary. Even though that may not be entirely accurate in the game's lore, seeing how the Mark IV OS are already legendaries and the Mark Vs are iconic. Now let's take a look at the Synaptic Signal Optimizer, which increases your max health. The Mark I SSO offers 20% bonus health, has no requirements, and it is rather cheap. If your body attribute is undeveloped and you have no plans of improving on that front, but you still want a bit of bonus health, get this one. The Mark II is one I've never used because by the time Watson opens up, I'm either a borged out super soldier who already purchased a superior version, or I'm a stealthy netrunner who doesn't even bother investing points into body. This one is only useful late in the game if you've maxed out other attributes and have finally managed to spare 8 points into body. The Mark III is rather special. plus 40% HP is nothing to sneer at if you're just starting out as a strong solo, and it will carry you through the first few levels until you can upgrade to a Mark V. The Mark IV is absolutely perfect for a min-maxer who wants to optimize his build, because plus 50% HP is huge and it only requires a body attribute of 15. Whereas the Mark V adds a mere plus 10% bonus health on top of the Mark IV, but requires you to go all in. Is it worth to spend 5 extra attribute points for this implant alone? I would say no, but if you want the level 20 perks in Brawling, Annihilation or Athletics, then the 60% max health will be a nice addition to your already hulked out physique. Basically, if you want an optimized build that is very good at almost everything, the Mark IV SSO is decent enough, but if you plan to max out your body attribute anyway, you can roll around with a Mark III until you can afford the Mark V. Another important implant which deserves further analysis is the Biomonitor, so let's take a look at each tier. The Mark I Biomon has no requirements, but it restores 30% of your total health if you get too injured. Is it worth 5k? Yeah, if your build ignores the body attribute and you have nothing better to install in your circulatory system. The Mark II offers a 10% bonus over the Mark I, but in stark contrast, it requires you to have developed your body to level 10. Honestly, I'd skip this one and go straight for the Mark III, which requires 12 body, but comes with an extra 10% health restoration compared to the Mark II. But the last two tiers have a huge difference between them, so which one should you get? Well, just like the SSO implant, the Mark IV is perfect for a jack of all trades, but if you already have 18 body, you should skip the Mark IV and jump straight to the Mark V, which restores all of your health when you get injured and it has the shortest cooldown. That's how I view the usefulness of each tier of cyberware. Basically, Mark Is are for mercenaries who don't meet the requirements for anything better. The Mark II is decent if you have a little bit of the required attribute but you don't plan to develop it any further. Mark III is a good entry level for those who plan on developing the attribute. Mark IV is perfect for min-maxing. And Mark V is for specialized builds who maximize the required attributes. For example, my optimized jack-of-all-trades build has 15 reflexes, 16 body, and 9 intelligence. The intelligence isn't there for hacking. The reason I even put points into it is to equip the Mark II Visual Cortex support and the Mark III Limbic System enhancement in my frontal cortex to boost my critical chance and damage. The last important piece of chrome that always finds its way into my nervous system is the Kerenzikov Reflex Booster on any build I'm playing. Let's talk about each tier and then we can move on to the next chapter. The Mark I and Mark II have no requirements and theoretically speaking, you should just purchase the better of the two, even if it costs a little more money. But here's the thing. In the first act of the game, while Watson is in lockdown, you cannot obtain the Mark II, so I always spend 5k on the Mark I because the ability it offers is a lifesaver. Once the lockdown is lifted, if I don't plan on developing my reflexes, I obtain the Mark II, simply because I want the best version available to me, but if you're running a reflex build, Mark II is obsolete. As for Mark III, 4, and 5, you should consider how you've built your character and simply purchase the best version that you can equip. If you're min-maxing, obviously Mark IV is the best. But if you fully devoted yourself to the reflex attribute, don't waste your money on anything but the Mark V. The reason I went through all this trouble to catalog all the cybernetics is to figure out a flexible build that can do it all. As I've said, this game is pretty easy, so you don't need to specialize in one thing in order to survive. For example, on my optimized build, by level 25 I will already have 15 reflexes, 16 body, and 9 intelligence, and from there I can choose to develop either tech or cool, whichever I find more interesting. But yeah, hopefully these comparisons will help you plan out your next build, or find the cyberware you'd like to incorporate into your current build. Now that you know how to choose the right version of a cybernetic implant you want to add to your build, I'll share all the other augmentations in the game while giving you my own opinions about each of them. The important thing to note is that some of the cyberware I'll show will be marked as found, because it was not sold by any Ripperdocs, but was obtained through exploration. Other cybernetics are marked as not found, which are not sold by any Ripperdoc, may possibly be found through exploration, but at the same time there's a chance they're not even in the game. If you take a look at the X disc, for example, you can probably figure out that there are no Mark I or Mark II versions, since the 3 existing tiers jump from 1 to 3 to 5 max RAM. If this implant came in 5 tiers, Mark I would have added 1 RAM, whereas every other tier would have added 1 more to a maximum of 5 RAM on the legendary tier. Now let us have a few words about every one of these implants, system by system. We'll start with those that go in the frontal cortex. The visual cortex support requires intelligence and boosts your critical damage. This works best for a gunslinger or vigilante who invested a few points into their intelligence attribute, and it's also helpful for an offensive netrunner who has unlocked this perk. The limbic system enhancement is about the same as the visual cortex support, except it increases your crit chance instead of crit damage. It also works with the aforementioned quick hacking perk. The X disc improves your max RAM. I shouldn't even have to say this, but this implant is useless if you aren't using a cyberdeck. The Camillo RAM Manager is like a biomonitor for your cyberdeck. When RAM drops too low, this implant restores a portion of your hacking mana. The RAM upgrade improves your RAM recovery. You might want to consider installing one of these if you find yourself running out of mana in the middle of combat. Heal on Kill has to be the most uncreative name for an implant, and in my opinion, it's kind of useless unless you have the reflex needed to equip the Mark IV or Mark V, and you're already running the Berserk OS. If these two cybernetics work in tandem, you may no longer need to rely on inhalers to heal up. The Mechatronic Core is an absolute must if you already spent points into the tech attribute. The extra damage against robots will certainly come in handy against these scary opponents. The Memory Boost is a wonderful tool for offensive netrunners that are armed with a Tetratronic Rippler or a NetDriver Mark V. That RAM per kill may not sound like much, but when your malware causes a wave of suicides, you'll almost never run out of RAM before you run out of enemies to kill. And the Self-Ice is a unique piece of cyberware that we've already discussed in the second chapter. Next up, there's the ocular implants. Not much to say about these, just buy the Kiroshi Mark III from Victor, fill it with mods and have fun. The circulatory system on the other hand offers a lot more upgrades. We've already discussed the Biomonitor, but if I were to add anything to what I've already said, the Biomon is your first line of defense when you find yourself in the middle of a firefight. When paired with an auxiliary heart, the Mark V Biomon will make you nearly immortal. The second heart was already discussed in chapter 2. The Bioconductor is a useful little implant which reduces the cooldown of all of your other implants. Biomon, Auxiliary Heart, Berserk Combat Amp. If you installed any of those, I highly recommend a Biocon. The Blood Pump is hardware I've never used in my entire life, for the simple reason that it must be assigned to the same button as inhalers, but can only be used once every 3 minutes, unlike the inhalers which can be spammed all day long. The Blood Pump is not an augmentation I personally recommend, but I'm not going to call it useless. Perhaps with the right combination of cyberware and equipment, it can be quite viable. The Synthetic Lungs, on the other hand, they are quite useless because there's already plenty of perks and equipment that help your stamina regeneration, and I've never even considered installing these. Maybe they're useful if you ever participate in a triathlon, otherwise, I'd install something else. The Adrenaline Booster is another implant that helps you restore stamina. Again, this is made useless by perks and I'd never consider wasting an upgrade port for it. The Micro Generator is a neat little device that releases a shockwave when you get too injured. Only problem with it is that if you don't have a Biomon or a second heart, you'll most likely be flatlined as soon as this device gets triggered. The Feedback Circuit restores a bit of your health every time your fully charged tech weapons hit an enemy. But just like the Micro Generator, this one can only be installed by techies. And the award for the most useless piece of tech for the circulatory system goes to the Bioplastic Blood Vessels, which greatly increase your health regeneration outside of combat. You're better off just buying yourself a burrito from a vending machine instead of wasting an upgrade port for this piece of shit. Next on the list, there's Immune System Enhancements. Kata Resist is rather straightforward as it simply improves your resistances to fire, electrical, or chemical damage. Shock and Awe is similar to the aforementioned Micro Generator, but instead of activating when your health drops, it can randomly trigger whenever you take damage. The Metabolic Editor treats poison as a life-saving medicine, which is rather neat. Similarly, the Inductor boosts your armor and resistances whenever you're electrocuted. Perhaps those last two implants should have been discussed in chapter 2, just like the pain editor and detoxifier. Only problem I have with immune system cyberware is that it requires you to invest points into the cool attribute, and unfortunately I've looked at too many explosions throughout my life to qualify. As for the integumentary system, there's not much I can say about it. Dr. Chrome is the only one in Night City selling implants for your skin, the most important of which is a legendary subdermal armor. If for some reason you cannot obtain the legendary variant, the doctor in Wellsprings sells the epic version of this implant. Most other skin implants require you to invest points into body, although a few of these require tech or cool. The nervous system is a weird one. There's so many implants to choose from, but you only have 2 slots, so you'll have to make them count. First there's the Kerenzikov, which is crucial for speedrunners but can easily be ignored if you already have a good sandevistan reflex booster. 2 time dilators aren't an absolute requirement. The reflex tuner acts like a passive Kerenzikov, and it triggers whenever your health drops to critical levels. If this thing activates, it might be time to use an inhaler or your blood pump. The synaptic accelerator is similar to the reflex tuner, except it alerts you whenever an enemy can spot you. This can be useful for sneaking, but I tend to avoid it. The neofiber increases your evasion. I'd be a liar if I said I know what evasion is, since I've never bothered with it, but if I were to venture a guess, I'd say that it helps you avoid damage from attacks coming your way, just like the ability with the same name from World of Warcraft. The nano relays are quite underrated as they increase the duration of your reflex boosters, and these are especially great for the Warp Dancer sandevistan. Lastly, there's the maneuvering system, which was discussed in the unique cyberware section. Next in order is the operating system, but that's what chapter 3 was for, so we're gonna move on to skeleton augmentations. The Synaptic Signal Optimizer, or SSO, increases your max health, but you already know that because we already discussed it. The micro rotors are great for a melee build. So is the micro vibration generator, or even the dense marrow, if you have stamina to spare. Which you will if you install a pair of bionic lungs. Which is not something I'd personally do since there's plenty of stamina perks, but hey, you do you. There's also the titanium bones, which are useless for combat, but are a neat utility enhancement in case you want to carry more stuff around. Lastly, you may install the bionic joints, which were already mentioned in chapter 2. And with that, we are pretty much done. There's no more systems we haven't already discussed, but I don't mind repeating some of the stuff I've already said. When it comes to your hand implant, you basically have to choose between the ability to use smart weapons or the ability to preview the ricochet direction of your power weapons. To be honest, I've never bothered using the ricochet because if I'm using power weapons, I'd rather shoot my enemy in the face. As for your arms, if you really need to change them before the lockdown is lifted, you can buy a pair of rare augmentations from any Ripperdoc, but as soon as you're able to leave Watson, I advise you to save up for a legendary arm replacement. As I've said, you can get the legendary blades and the monowire for free, but if you're like me and you want to return to Monkey, you'll have to pay 100k, either in Wellsprings or at the downtown clinic. There's no reason to waste your 80s on epic arms, but hey, I'm not gonna tell you what to do with your money. Last but not least are the legs. Because these are so expensive, you're only gonna want to buy one of these augmentations and then stick with it for the remainder of your playthrough. So let me help you decide. The rare fortified ankles offer the highest jump distance, but they must be charged first, and that takes a couple of seconds. That's not really my cup of tea since I prefer spamming the jump button. The rare reinforced tendons on the other hand, or rather foot, allow you to jump in midair, which enables 2 things. Firstly, you can leap much higher than your regular legs allow, and secondly, if you fall from a building, you can activate your second jump to avoid taking too much damage. This won't save your life if the height is too great, so be careful. The epic fortified ankles sold by Duck Fingers are not as reliable as the previously mentioned augmentations, but they are a lot more versatile. With this cyberware installed, you can both charge your leap or double jump. But the greatest advantage of this variant is the ability to activate its built-in hover thrusters to break your fall or even levitate towards a ledge you can climb onto. This cyberware isn't exactly user-friendly and it will take a while for you to learn how to use it, but in my opinion, it's worth the $75,000 price tag. Lastly, there's the link spas, which are the most expensive. What do you get for spending 85 grand? The sound of your footsteps is muffled and that's it. they offer no mobility, which is the entire goddamn reason I buy leg cyberware. At least it would have been nice if it lived up to its name and enabled us to scale walls like a real Lynx, but as things stand, there's better and cheaper options for stealth. And with that said, we've concluded our cyberware shopping list. There may be some undocumented cybernetics that you could probably find by exploring Night City and its surroundings, but everything that you can buy has been listed in this video. All I hope now is that this list won't become outdated as the game is being improved, but we'll never know. If that happens, I'll post an updated version of this video. Anyway, once you've augmented your weak flesh with cybernetics, all that's left to do is installing the proper modifications. As with all the other items listed in this guide, mods have also been organized depending on where they're installed. Let's first talk about mods for your Kiroshi optics. I have found a few of those on enemies or in various loot chests, but the most reliable source for eye upgrades is your trusty Ripper, Victor. If you trade with him, you can obtain the following mods. The target analysis, which renders all of your weapons, cybernetics, and even quick hacks non-lethal. If you have this one installed and you upload the self-deletion demon onto an enemy's systems, he'll shoot himself in the head, but somehow he'll still be alive because you had this mod jammed into your eyeballs. The threat detector is good for stealth, as it pings enemies who are about to spot you. The trajectory analysis is amazing for gunslingers or anyone who uses guns and prefers to aim for the head. Plus 50% headshot damage, god damn. And if you wait for a few days after you buy your first TA, you can most likely purchase another when Victor replenishes his stock, at least that worked for me. The previous mod should not be confused with the trajectory generator, which allows you to preview the ricochet direction of your power weapons, only when paired with a ballistic coprocessor. I've said this already, I shouldn't have repeated it. Oh well. Last but probably the best mod is the weak spot detector, which slightly raises your chances of landing a critical hit. Did I even need to tell you what these things do? You're perfectly capable of reading their descriptions yourself. Oh well. Next, there's mods for your operating systems. Because you can read their descriptions yourself, I won't do that for you, but I do have one thing to say about the Arasaka software mod. When you install it into your reflex booster, enemies will have a harder time detecting you. You know what that means? It means that if you want to play a quick and stealthy cyber ninja, you can purchase the Chianti Mark IV Sandevistan, you know, the one with a 15-second cooldown, install this mod into it, and when you activate the time dilation, you can simply run past enemies and then hide while the cooldown refreshes. Add some nano relays to increase the Sandevistan duration and you may complete stealth missions without ever leaving a trace. All without having to play the I'm not a robot CAPTCHA minigame of Breach Protocol. Damn, now I really want to play like this. Moving on to the Berserk mods, here's what I think of them. Chained Berserk sounds very good in theory, especially when paired with a Zeta Tech Mark IV, you know, the one with a 10-second cooldown, but in practice it's kind of a waste. The purpose of the Berserk is to install powerful mods into it and turn into a monster while it's active. With this mod you will activate the Berserk more often, but you'll be a lot less dangerous. What I prefer to use instead is 3 beast modes, if I'm running a melee build, but for everything else I try to get a nice balance of crit chance and crit damage. Then again you can use whichever of these mods you want. As for cyberdeck mods, there are no mods for that operating system. Instead, the cyberdeck is equipped with quick hacks, which are such an extensive subject that would add another 20 minutes to this video, and as such, I'll leave it for the hacking tutorial if anybody requests it. Last but definitely not least are mods for your arms. Some of these mods are quite obvious because you cannot install electric knuckles on the mantis blades, but others are confusing, so let's start with the gorilla arms. First you've got knuckles, which change your damage type and not much else. Then there's the batteries. You've got low, medium and high capacity batteries which increase your charge and charge damage. Basically, the gorilla arms get charged every time you use your light attacks on someone, and they get discharged when you execute a heavy. Batteries basically allow you to supercharge your gorilla arms, but they don't increase the damage you deal with light attacks or regular heavy attacks that weren't charged. Get it? Got it? Good. There's also the black market battery, which doubles your charge, but I personally prefer to use the RIN 3U battery? Don't know how to pronounce that. Anyway, this one restores all stamina when an enemy is defeated, which renders all the other stamina-related cybernetics and perks obsolete. Then there's one more mod slot that can accommodate neither knuckles nor batteries. What is that? I'll tell you once we're done with all the other arm mods, alright? Similar to the monkey arms, the monowire also deals damage based on its charge. But the way it works is quite the opposite, because unlike the gorillas, the wire charges when it is not used in combat. It charges over time as you are not using it, but from what I've noticed, it charges instantly if you swap your weapons. Anyway, the wire's damage type can be changed with mods similar to the gorilla knuckles, and you can also install different batteries to increase the charge level of the weapon. Mantis blades are a bit different simply because they do not charge. They just indiscriminately slash, so the only mods besides the different blades is the rotor. If you want to be a monster who slashes everything in his path, the Japantown Ripper has something nice for you for only 7,000 eddies. Enjoy! The last arm upgrade you can install is the projectile launch system, which I call the PLS. Please. The first mod slot for this weapon is the warhead. You've got the regular explosive projectile, electrical, chemical, and even thermal rounds. Hell, you've got two types of incendiary projectiles, but I personally didn't notice any difference between them. And if you're a puppy-loving pacifist, you can even install tranquilizer darts. I personally like having a melee combat option, but in case you belong to a race of blue-skinned Xenos, then the Pliss is a pretty nifty addition to your arsenal. Second mod slot is for plating, which adds some passive bonuses, but there's also this empty upgrade slot for all ARM cyberware, so what's the deal with it? You see, this is where you slot the sensory amplifier mod. This mod is weird because you've got 4 types of sensory amplifiers. One that increases crit chance, one for crit damage, one for armor, and one for health. These mods are so dirt cheap you should just buy all of them and swap them around whenever you feel like it. You'll be visiting all the Rippers anyway, might as well buy all the mods you're gonna use. And in case I wasn't perfectly clear, the sensory amplifier can be installed in all of the ARM upgrades. The blades, the fists, the wire, and the police. Well, not quite all of them, just the legendary ones. Last but not least, I've also compiled a list with all the recipes for these mods in case you want to craft them yourself, and as you can see, I've also written down the level of tech required to craft them. Technically speaking, you need to unlock the appropriate perks in the crafting tree to build these yourself, but those perks require a certain level in the tech attribute. But to be quite frank, I see no reason to spend your money on recipes when you can just purchase the mods for a much lower price. And if you want more of the same mod, simply wait around until the Rippers refresh their stock. Maybe this is a bug and this only happened to me, but I did manage to obtain 2 trajectory analysis mods without even bothering with the recipe, which is the single most expensive item in the game. 500,000 eddies, Jesus. Not even my millionaire hacker would spend his hard-earned cash on this, but if he did, it would be a waste of money because he only has 5 points in tech. Anyway, we're pretty much done. All I have left to add are a few ideas on how to build a character now that we have all this information in one place. First thing to consider is which OS you want, and then developing its required attribute to the appropriate level. Next, you're gonna have to take a look at the other cyberware, such as the SSO, Korenzikov, Biomon, or literally anything else you'd want to fit into your build, and then developing your character towards unlocking those cybernetics. But of course, you're free to simply develop one attribute to the max, then develop a secondary attribute to the max, assign your remaining points wherever you want, and then use this guide to figure out which augments you can install on your particular build. To put it simply, you don't need to plan out your character like I suggested. You'll be fine even if all you do is improvise. I mean, that's what I did for most of my time in this game, and I encountered no problem that I couldn't overcome. Then again, the game is very easy even on the Apocalypse difficulty, so it's not like you need a proper plan in place. But that's pretty much all you needed to know about cyberware. I hope this was helpful. The last thing I want to say is that the information presented in this guide took a very long time to be put together, and if you appreciate my efforts and would like to see more content like this, it would be cool if you gave this video a thumbs up or even subscribed. If you already have, you are awesome and you have my thanks. But yeah, time for me to fuck off. Thank you all for watching and I'll see ya next time. Bye bye.